Welcome to another GearTester tabletop review. Today I'd like to talk about the RC4, also known as the Esee4. What you see in front of you is the RC4, made by Rag Cutlery Co. I think it is just a really awesome knife. For me, it really is a reference knife for the medium fixed blade knife department. As I look at medium fixed blade knives, I usually compare them against this knife, both because of the quality of this knife and because of the quality of the sheath that it comes with, as well as some of the aftermarket sheaths you can buy for it. This is the RC4, made by Rag Cutlery, but if you wanted to buy this knife now, you would need to be looking for the Esee4. Rag Cutlery originally was making some of their knives, such as this RTAC2 right here. See, this is Randall's Adventure and Training, a company that was making and manufacturing knives through Ontario Knife Company. However, after some falling out and some problems, Rag Cutlery decided to go out on their own and make their own knives. But through some different arguments through the legal system and getting some lawyers involved, I think that Rag Cutlery had to change its name, and so they chose Esee. So any of the knives that you would have formerly known as the RC4 or the RC3 or RC5, RC6 are now known as the Esee, and then their designated number. Right here, this one is the RC4, now known as the Esee4. And all the specifications that I'll be giving you for this knife will be exactly the same for the Esee4, coming with the same sheath. You can get it with this some other configurations of the sheath. But if you wanted to buy this knife after watching my review, you would need to Google the Esee4 fixed blade. Let's go over the specs of this knife. This knife is 9 inches long from tip to pommel of the blade. It is a cutting edge, so the cutting edge is 4 inches, slightly over 4 inches long. Right there, the cutting edge. Alright. The full blade length from the tip of the blade to where this the grip begins is 4.5 inches. The maximum thickness of the blade here is going to be 3/16 of an inch thick, which makes this an excellent knife as a survival knife for batoning through wood. And that's where you take the log, set it here, and then you use some kind of a mallet or club out of wood to drive the knife down in, creating pressure to one side, thus splitting the piece of wood open. An excellent survival knife because of that thickness. The blade width is 1 1/4 inches wide, giving it a really nice feel in your hand and giving it just a really broad, nice cutting edge. It weighs, not including the sheath, knife only, 7.4 ounces. The steel this knife is made out of is 1095 steel, a very common steel used for lots of knives. And on the Rockwall scale of hardness, it's 57, if that's important to you. The new knives, the Esee, will actually have a serial number on the pommel, and this knife comes with this Kydex sheath. What you see on it here is called the Molly back sheath, and that connects onto, you can either get it with the knife, which of course is going to increase your price, or you can just get the knife and the sheath, and it comes with some paracord and some things with the sheath, but does not come with the mole back if you get it at its cheapest configuration. If you pay a little bit more, you can get the molly back with the sheath. You can also actually buy this molly back individually, separately. So if you got the knife, wanted the knife and wanted the sheath right away, you could get those and then wait a little bit longer and then pay about $25 for this molly back. The original sheath comes with the screws that you'll need. So let's talk a little bit more about the knife before we fully go into the sheath there. You can see that it has a lanyard hole in the pommel. You can also get this knife with I think what they call the glass breaking pommel. I personally didn't want that. They just kind of ridged this out a little more steel there on the pommel, and they make it pointed. So you could take the knife and drive it through a windshield or some other glass to break it as kind of a escape tool. I didn't want it just because I don't like having something pointed there, because that tends to be where I choke back on my knife to do cutting tools, where I might bring another hand in here or things, and I didn't want this to be poking me either in my side as I wore it on the sheath, or just poking my gear or skin when I wasn't paying attention. So I decided I'd get the non-glass breaking pummel there. This knife also comes in different configurations, whether you want orange handles, whether you want a different color coating of blade. I personally really like this tan blade with the green handles there, but they make them with orange. I believe they make them in black. They also make them in tan. And I really like this knife. I really like the way it attaches. It's going to add some weight by having 3 attachment points into the handle holding that on. But as using this as a survival knife or just a good backpacking knife, I want that durability and I want that ruggedness that I find in this knife. This knife uses a full polishing of the blade here, so that you don't just have the blade beginning partially here. This blade is full flat ground, meaning that they started grinding the blade and forming the blade all the way here, so they use 100% of the blade to come to a point. An example of this that you see is this is really used in a lot of European knives, where they start the grind, this full flat grind, and they bring it all the way down to a point, so that you're doing like this. Many American knives use just a flat piece of stock steel, and then they bevel the point right there. This bevel to make the blade point begins 100% from this side of the knife moving all the way to the blade. An example of a very common kind of American knife design is this Ontario Pilot's knife, survival knife. I've had this for a number of years. I do not believe it was military issue. I got this off of a friend who gave it to me. And this is a very American profile blade where they've used just a stock piece of steel. It's not full tang construction, and then they begin the bevel to make the blade about 1/3 of the way into the knife. So they just start beveling it here and come instantly to a point. Some people would feel that maybe this form of sharpening of a blade makes for a stronger blade because it removes less material. I probably would agree with that. However, I personally prefer the full flat ground. If you're batoning through wood and things, because the bevel only goes 1/3 of the way into the knife, it's easy to get a knife like this stuck in the wood. It doesn't flow as easy through the wood, and I don't like the way it looks as much as I really like the way that this RC4 or ESEE4 the bevel would be starting with a full flat ground. I just like the way it feels. I like the way it makes the knife look. For me, it may be a second kind of cool. There's a nothing fancy term that I have assimilated into my vocabulary. Let's now move to the sheath, and I'm going to do a video here in a couple weeks, maybe a month, talking about knives, fixed blade knives, and how you relate their sheaths and how you look at a sheath. To me, a fixed blade knife is its own entity, and its sheath is another separate entity. And I have not bought specific fixed blade knives because they did not have a quality sheath with them. And a quality sheath is going to attach the knife to me in a very effective way. It's also going to have some very effective ways of keeping the knife centered in the sheath. Okay, so look at a knife and its sheath as two separate entities that come together in a marriage, which make you really use a knife. What I found is if a knife doesn't have a good sheath, a fixed blade knife, I don't carry the fixed blade knife. No matter how cool, no matter how awesome the knife is, if I don't have a good way of attaching that knife to me or protecting myself from its cutting edge, then I just don't use it. And so I either give or sell those knives, give them away or sell them, because they're basically worthless to me. So knife companies, as you construct knives, think about putting more money into the actual sheath. A lot of companies, I think, look at the knife, we need to market the knife, but they don't think about marketing the sheath to you. And I think that both of them are equally important. And the reason that the RC4 or ESEE4 knife is very very important to me as a reference blade is because of the quality of this sheath. First of all, it comes, if you just get the cheapest configuration with just this and some paracord and some screws. And then if you wanted to pay a little bit more, you can either buy this from ESEE knife cutlery company, or you can buy it through one of their vendors and attach that on. But the Kydex sheath, this part then is what I'm talking about here. the retention that this gives, and that this screw actually allows you to choose the amount. The more you screw that screw in, the more retention this is actually going to have. And just the construction and quality of thickness. I've had a number of Kydex knife sheaths, but this one has been by far the thickest and just robust and best formed. And Esee Cutlery uses a number of these style of sheaths. They also use some plastic ones, which I haven't owned them, but from looking at them and from watching a number of videos online about them, they seem to be the same quality, even though they're not made of Kydex. Let's look at the retention that you get with this. Listen, you see that snap? Do you hear this? This just a full in snap. Okay, the retention. Okay, it's not coming out of there at all. This knife is not going to leave the sheath. Okay, having this MOLLE back on it allows me to attach it to different MOLLE systems, right? Using those webbing loops through. It also is a very effective belt sheath, because I can simply just put my belt through there, or I can make use of these straps. So Rag Cutlery has done an excellent job of giving you, or not Rag Cutlery, excuse me, Esee Cutlery has done an excellent job of giving you a belt sheath which is also MOLLE compatible, which I really appreciate and like. The retention of the sheath and this MOLLE back to me make this knife a premium blade. Even if the knife wasn't as nice as the Esee 4 is, I would still be interested in the knife because it's very easy to attach to my gear or to myself. The other thing is that it is a one-hand retention system. So I can just here, pretend this is on my belt, I can pull it right out, I can put it right back in. If I want to add more retention, one-handed, I can do that Velcro. I can also get it out one-handed. This hand is simply here to provide weight. Right, out, out. Okay? Then when I'm done using my knife, I don't need another hand. I can just slip this down in, put it in the sheath, and if I want that extra retention, the Kydex already has plenty of retention, I can do that. Esee Cutlery has also provided this elastic keeper that gives you that much more retention. This knife is not going to leave that sheath, even if it pulled out of its Kydex holster. Okay, it's not going anywhere, and they did that to make this knife jump. So if you're gonna, as a military individual, use this to parachute out of an airplane, this knife would not be leaving you. They have different specifications. I believe that Esee Cutlery decided to meet those specifications. So having basically 3 forms of retention of the blade all combined into one makes this knife sheath and this knife just amazing, just awesome. Okay, so I've talked about this sheath and I've talked about the knife. Now I want to talk about this sheath that has been sitting here quietly. This is, to the best of my knowledge, not made by Rag Cutlery or Esee Cutlery. This is a sheath that is made by Sharpshooter Sheath Systems using KSF leather, some kind of treated leather that allows it to resist water and mildew and a number of things, kind of making it really, really tough, really, really strong way of treating it, I believe. You can only buy this knife sheath from knivesshipfree.com. That's the only place I've been able to find it. And I actually bought this knife here, the RC4, now the Esee 4, because of this leather sheath. I like the Kydex, I like the MOLLE back, but I like being able to have multiple sheath systems because I put this MOLLE back onto some MOLLE webbing gear that I had, and I didn't want to always be taking it off. So that allowed me to have this on my MOLLE gear, leave that on my gear, and then if I wanted to take this knife out and backpacking or camping or hiking, or even just throw it in my bag, I had another sheath. And this sheath is an expensive sheath. It's about $50. And I think if you're going to get this MOLLE back and the Kydex, it's going to run you about $40, maybe more around the $50 price point. So it would have been basically the same price, but it gives me a more traditional look. It gives me a leather sheath, and I like leather. I love Kydex. I think that there are definitely reasons for this, but I still like a good quality leather sheath. And for me, this is a reference leather sheath. This sharpshooter sheath made for the RC4 or Esee 4. First of all, it comes with a little fire steel loop there. It doesn't actually come with the fire steel, but it allows you to kind of have a mini survival system, a blade and some fire. It gives you these multiple hole attachments, so you could attach it to some MOLLE, both using that and this. This also is going to allow you to strap it down to your waist, strap it down to your your thigh if you're running this in a normal belt, right? Which I'm going to introduce a new term here that I've never heard anybody else use, but it's called the slap factor. Okay, and what I find is that if I have a gun holster or a knife or something on my belt, so my belt is running through here, the more distance that the knife sheath or pistol holster covers from this point down my leg, the more likely it is to slap. And that creates a slap factory. Okay, the longer that knife sheath goes down or that pistol sheath goes down, if I'm trying to run or even jog or just move quickly, that sheath slaps or that holster slaps, and that slap factor, it makes me very uncomfortable. It makes wearing the knife uncomfortable, wearing the pistol uncomfortable. So one of the things I really like about this particular sheath is that it minimizes that slap factor. Because, if you can see this, the pommel of the knife actually clears this area. When I have this knife on my this sheath on my belt, it minimizes the amount of movement that the knife can do. This holster, or actually this sheath here by the company which makes the RC4 or the Esee E4, does that too. It's a little bit higher, so there's going to be some more slap factor in there as you run or move around. But because this is a MOLLE and I tend to put it right onto MOLLE gear, that minimizes the slap factor. But even as a belt sheath system, putting on my belt, this is very rigid, and it actually lowers the amount of slap factor as well. So having this leather sheath lower the slap factor rather than having many sheaths have a bigger loop here and bring it up, and then you've got the loop up here and your belt's in here, and this whole thing is able to rotate. Whereas here, you've got a lot less slap factor going on. Another thing I really like about this sheath is very similar to this Kydex sheath made by Esee Cutlery, is the fact that it is a one-hand operation sheath. I don't like having to reach my left hand over and grasp the sheath to try and get my knife in or out or try and do the buckle. For instance, this Ontario knife, a pilot's knife, kind of a Vietnam era knife, has this snap. Well, sometimes you can't. This has been broken in, and this has spent time with the knife in the knife sheath. Okay, and that means that if I one-handed operation, knife comes out, knife goes back in, and I can snap that. But many companies choose not to attach this. They choose to just cut another loop, almost like this one here, and run this through, so that this band actually moves back and forth. An example of that would be SOG and the leather sheath which they make right here. This happens to be a sheath for the Northwest Ranger. I undo this snap, and what happens? Now this moves back and forth. So what happens is that you have to kind of mess around with this sheath here. If I'm going to put my knife back in the sheath, I put it back in the sheath, and then I need to really reach this hand over, grasp this, so that I can get this snap done, usually using my hand like this to get it back on the knife. That is not true of this KSF Sharpshooter Sheath Systems leather aftermarket sheath for the ESE4. I simply am going to leave this hand down here, creating what gravity would be if this knife was on my sheath. Okay, pull the knife out, use the knife for what I want to be using the knife for, and then I simply bring it back in. One-handed operation, put the snap there. And that's because they've done a single point snap, and that's the terminology I'm using, meaning that this, or a fixed snap point, meaning you have one that moves and one that's fixed to the sheath. When you have two that move, okay, getting those two together can sometimes be a two-handed operation. So I really like this aftermarket sheath, which you can purchase at knivesshipfree.com. I think that's the only place you can purchase it. The quality leather, which is weather, water, and mildew resistant. And I've used this sheath for probably hundreds of hours. I was in a situation where I was able to carry a fixed blade knife on me for an extended set of weeks, and this is the knife that I carry, the sheath that I carry the RC4 in, now the Esee E4, And so you can see it's starting to maybe show a little bit of wear and tear, but most leather sheaths that come from companies are going to show instant wear. However, this one has not shown a lot of wear, and I've used it for hundreds of hours. You can see on the back where it's rubbing against me, it has not discolored, and it still retains a knife very well. There's no way it's coming out of there. The quality of this knife sheath is amazing, and after having seen that I could get both of these sheaths for this knife, that's one of the reasons I purchased it. I would definitely recommend the RC4 if you can find it, or the Esee E4 to anyone in the market looking for a quality fixed blade, a medium fixed blade, survival or recreation knife. I think that this is just an awesome blade. I've talked to you guys quite a bit now about the sheath systems. I really appreciate being able to have a quality, almost custom quality leather knife sheath. This is going to be $50, but definitely worth it to have the one-hand operation. I also really like this Kydex sheath. I think that if you like Kydex, you will love this sheath. If you like leather, you will love this. And I think if you buy the Esee4 from kniveshipfree.com, you can actually choose to get it with just this leather sheath, or you can choose to get it with the Kydex sheath and or the MOLLE back. Guys, I definitely recommend this knife to you. I definitely recommend both of these knife sheaths to you. I appreciate your views. I appreciate your subscriptions. This is the Gear Tester signing out.